The tugboat, for its size, is the most powerful craft afloat, and the Star Tugs are the power behind the docks and waterways that make up the big city port. This is TUGS.
Zain. Read and adapted for audio by TARDIS9.
Based on the television series TUGS by Robert D. Cardona and David Mitton.
One of the many hazards of operating a tugboat company is the multitude of dangerous areas vessels of any size or type may be required to visit. Dem Der Rocks was one such place. On any average day it was dangerous enough, with jagged edges that stuck out like knives amongst the waters. But, as the likes of even Zebedee knew all too well, bad weather made the rocks deadly. Poor visibility would often lead to trouble, and were it not for the presence of Lily Lightship, many an unsuspecting boat, ship, or even submarine would meet an unpleasant and untimely end. But that was not all. Many myths and legends surround the sea, and Dem Der Rocks was no exception. Only Hercules, OJ, and Zorran knew about this, and by the time the other tugboats discovered it would be all too late. I remember that particular tale well. It all began at the Zero Dock, when Captain Zero gathered the Z-Stacks around for their morning briefing. He was just about to give them their orders when a deep booming whistle sounded. An ocean-going tug steamed into the dock. He looked very much like Hercules, having been built to the same design. However, he carried the Z-Stack's brown livery, complete with their insignia on his smokestack, and a black fedora with white lining. He looked at the rest of the fleet with some fascination, as well as a sense of superiority.
"Ah, you're early,"
said Captain Zero.
"Right, listen up, you lot. We have a new member of our team. Meet Zain. He's going to be our new ocean-going tug."
But what do we need one of them for?" Zip asked.
"Yeah, we can take ships out to sea ourselves,"
Zug agreed.
"You dummies,"
sneered Zorran.
"It's obvious, ain't it? Ocean-going tugs are among the strongest of the lot." "Right you are, Zorran,"
added Captain Zero.
"And it has come to my attention that the Star Tugs have one thing we lack, an ocean-going tug. With Zain here, we'll finally be able to compete with them on a more even keel. And besides, Zain doesn't have the record that you imbeciles all have."
"Too right, sir," Zain agreed. He then addressed the others. "Look here, I may be freshly painted, but I've strength and experience enough to watch myself, which is more than I can say for you lot." "What a track record you have."
"We wouldn't have a record if that stars didn't interfere all the time,"
grumbled Zack.
"You wouldn't have a record if you all just had a single brain cell between you,"
Captain Zero thundered.
"Now shut up and listen to me. Zack, Zebedee, I have an emergency job for you. A goods train has derailed and landed in the port. Zebedee, you take Mighty Balls to the site and help Top Hat with the cleanup operation. He'll be waiting with Frank and Eddie to take the wreckage away. Zack, you fetch an empty barge to help clear away the debris. It's at the same rate that you two destroyed last year. And let me assure you, I've only agreed to this job because we're getting paid more than the Star Tugs. Mess this up and I'm taking the money we lose out of your paychecks." "Right away, sir,"
Zebedee said as they steamed away.
"Always willing to help your star buddies, eh, Zeb?"
teased Zack.
"Shut up,"
retorted Zebedee. Captain Zero then rounded on his switchers.
"Zip, Zack, I need you to look for any trappers to bring in. And don't come back until you've found at least 5 tolls each."
5? Spluttered Zip. Oh, that's an awful lot.
And the amount I spent on your bales at the Angelus was an awful lot. And the time you spent in community service was an awful lot.
Captain Zero roared.
So you owe me an awful lot. Ah, come on, Zip,
said Sug.
Let's get to it before we owe him more.
As the other tugs left the dock, Zero turned his attention to the 2 remaining Z-sacks.
Zorran, the old quayside needs more stones for his foundations. Take Zain with you and show him the ropes. I want to see just how strong he is. Prove to the quarry that anything the Star Tugs can do, Zero Marine can do better.
Aye, aye, sir, grinned Zorran.
We'll show those hulking rust buckets just what a Z-sack can really do.
The 2 tugs headed out to work. As they made their way towards the quarry, Zorran turned to Zain.
Listen,
he said.
I know you've got experience, but you're still new here, so you'd better listen to me. You see a yellow tug with red, blue and white in their stacks with a fancy star, you take care. That's the Starfleet, our rivals. Bunch of goody-goodies they are. We're out to beat them. Any contract comes up, we gotta get it. Don't be an idiot like the others, and you'll be alright. Then why should I take care?
Asked Zain.
Because of OJ and Hercules.
Zorran replied.
OJ's an old paddle steamer. Pretty useless in a fight, but not one to ignore. Sometimes he's got a point on stuff. But the one you should really watch is Hercules. You want to try anything, I'd watch out for him. He's strong he is, and sharp. Never cross swords with him or ignore him. You'll only give yourself more problems if you do.
Snorted Zain. I'll be fine in any fight. And I don't need any advice from any Star Tug either. Just show me where this quarry is and let's get on with it.
Say yourself,
said Zorran.
But don't come crying to me if you get into something stupid.
They passed the foundations and then made their way to the quarry. 6 empty barges lay waiting by the quayside near the conveyor belt.
Right,
said Zorran.
Good few barges we have here. Load them up and get them to those foundations we passed by. Then get back here for more sharpish. Remember, quality and quantity. The more we get delivered in top shape, the better the money for us. And then that contract's ours. Got it?
Yeah, whatever, sniffed Zain. He backed onto all the barges, then tied them up.
You're not gonna take the whole lot, are you?
Zorran gasped.
Yeah.
What of it? Retorted Zain.
Nothing,
sneered Zorran.
Just don't expect Captain Zero to fork out for repairs right after he's bought you.
But Zain didn't listen. Instead, he loaded up all the barges and sailed away with them as though they were mere boys. Zorran raised his hat in bewilderment.
Crikey!
He gasped. Then he grinned maliciously.
Up yours, Star Stacks,
he thought.
We Zebs now have this contract in the bag.
Zain arrived at the quarry and left his barges there. As he had brought so many of them, there were none waiting for the return trip. He headed back to the quarry to collect more barges, passing Warrior on his way.
Too slow, Starbuck,
he shouted. What? Warrior exclaimed. He then saw the barges at the quayside. Sovereign Stacks! He exclaimed. Desperately, he turned sharply and headed towards the quarry, just as Zorran approached the quayside with his barge load. But by the time Warrior had reached the quarry, it was too late. Zain had already taken the remaining barges for himself and was now loading them up. He sneered at Warrior.
Watch this, weakling,
he said. The last of the rocks was loaded onto the final barge, and Zain moved off. Zorran saw everything and pulled up alongside Warrior.
Who's the strongest now?
He jeered. Warrior was about to say something in retaliation, but was interrupted by a whistle and the sound of paddles hitting water. OJ came up alongside Zorran, his expression serious.
Zorran,
he said.
I need to speak to you. Alone.
Warrior was confused. This wasn't like OJ to confide in a Z-stack, and Zorran of all tugs. But then he saw OJ's expression and guessed it was something serious. He hurried away, not hearing what it was that the old paddle tug said to Zorran. Perhaps, he decided, he could at least see if there was a barge for the return trip. Needless to say, Captain Zero was exceptionally pleased to hear how Zain had performed.
Excellent work, Zain.
He complimented at the Zero dock that night.
I can see how you're going to be an asset to our fleet.
Just then, Zorran turned starboard and entered the dock.
Zorran!
Zero continued.
You needn't trouble yourself about the lack of deliveries on your part today. Zain has proved himself to be more than capable of doing the work of two tugs. Tomorrow, you are to show Zain where to meet incoming vessels for a toll. After that, I shall need you to deliver an old wreck to the breakers yard. With Zain's strength, he should be able to manage by himself.
All the Z-sacks grinned at this, except for Zorran. His face was neutral. Without another word, Captain Zero pulled his megaphone into the Zero Marine building and made his way home. The Z-stacks were now alone. Not that they particularly cared. They were all too eager about finally getting one over my star tugs.
With Zain on our side, the stars don't stand a chance,
grinned Zug.
They'd be lucky to get so much as a dredging contract now,
agreed Zip.
Hey, don't forget about Hercules and OJ,
replied Zebedee.
They're not ones to be underestimated, those two. Who cares about them?
retorted Zack.
We got tuggers more than enough for both of them now.
Too right I am, Zain added. You should have seen that star's face when I took his barge. Big fella he was. Had number 5 on his stack.
You mean Warrior?
Zebedee asked. Yeah, him, Zain said.
It's a strong tug who beats him in strength and power,
replied Zebedee.
And that's not saying much,
added Zip.
Yeah,
agreed Zug.
Warrior's a few rivets short of a hole, you see, just like all them stars. Nah, shut it, will ya?
Zorran cut in.
Not all them stars are that dumb.
The other Z-sacks looked closely at him. They were baffled by Zorran's neutral expression. Usually he'd be enraged that another tug had upstaged him. He would certainly never say something in favour of anyone in Starfleet unless something exceptionally serious had happened.
Hey, Zorran,
Zebedee said as quietly and carefully as he could.
What's up?
Zorran paused, breathing deeply. Then he said,
Something's come up. Something I gotta look into. I'll tell you all tomorrow.
sneered Zain.
Getting all worked up over something small, eh, Zorran? Or was it something that useless old paddler said? Shut it, Zain,
Zorran replied.
Is that it?
Chuckled Zain.
You're afraid of a useless pile of old... Ow!
He gave a cry of pain as Zorran rammed into him.
When I say shut it, you shut it,
Zorran said quietly but furiously.
Or do you want to see what that dockside feels like?
Zain stared coldly at him. You try and force me onto the dockside, he said menacingly, and I'll crush that weak little hull of yours. The other Z-sacks were shocked. No one had dared oppose Zorran like that before. Zorran returned Zain's gaze.
Maybe,
he said coldly.
But is it even worth the risk to yourself?
Zain snorted and looked away. Zorran backed slowly away, a scowl forming on his face. Zebedee, Zack, Zip and Zug looked at each other. They had nothing but the utmost respect for Zorran and Zain, but all four of them had a bad feeling within their hulls. A feeling that matters would escalate and worsen for all concerned. Things were no better the next day. Zorran and Zain said nothing but shot dirty looks at each other. Silently, they made their way to the harbour mouth, where they parted company. Zain went towards the waiting ships, while Zorran turned and made his way towards Dem Der Rocks. He found OJ and Hercules waiting for him there. Both of them had very grave looks on their faces. "Ah, Zorran," said Hercules. "I assume OJ told you why we're all here?"
Sure,
said Zorran.
come on then. Let's get this over with. I got work to do.
Meanwhile, Zain busied himself in his work. He went back and forth from the harbour mouth, taking ships of all shapes and sizes. When 10 cents arrived, he couldn't believe his eyes. There seemed to be fewer ships waiting than usual. "What the?" he exclaimed. Then he saw Zain towing in a tramper. He thought.
He looks like trouble.
Zain sneered at him as he went past.
Go find a swimming pool, you little toy dinghy.
10 cents was about to reply when Zain disappeared from sight. He decided to think nothing of it, and instead made his way over to a schooner to offer a tow. The next tug Zain saw on his way into port was Sunshine. He had been on his way to help 10 cents bring vessels into the port. Zain took one look at him and burst out laughing. "Whatever is this port like?" he cackled. "First I see a toy dinghy, now I see something from a kid's train set."
Leave the work to us real boats, you pathetic little shrimp.
Sunshine gasped. The last time he had heard a Z-Stack say something like that to him had all just been part of one of Zorran's schemes, but this was on a whole new level of insulting. He was so upset by Zain's insult that he didn't watch where he was going and bumped into some shrimpers. "What's they cried.
Well, sorry, lads,"
Sunshine exclaimed. He quickly reversed and carried on towards the harbour mouth.
"So we're agreed then?"
asked Zorran. "Yes," said Hercules. "I'll be the first to admit that we should have told you when you arrived first, Zorran, when last this happened. We were foolish not to." Zorran winced. He knew what Hercules meant and had no wish to relive it.
"Right, that's settled then,"
said OJ.
"Hercules and I will inform Starfleet. Zorran, you must warn the other Z-Sacks. I don't know if this newcomer Zain will listen to any of us, but he needs to know regardless."
Without another word, the 3 tugs pulled away from Dem Der Rocks and went their separate ways. Soon Sunshine arrived at the mouth. There seemed to be fewer ships waiting for a tow than usual. In the distance, he could see 10 cents approaching a tramp steamer and begin to negotiate the prices. Sunshine was about to whistle a greeting when he heard a deep booming whistle from behind him. Suddenly, Zain appeared on his starboard side, so close that he almost scraped the little switcher's paintwork. Sunshine watched on in horror as the Z-Sack's new recruit sailed quickly towards 10 cents and the tramper. Just as 10 cents was about to throw a line around it, Zain approached him on the starboard side, then shoved him violently out of the way. Zain then threw a tow line around the tramper and took it into port.
"Get you in for half what that little dinghy was offering?"
he asked the tramper loud enough for the switchers to hear. "Get me in for..." "You kidding? Just $40? Oh, thanks," the tramper said with incredulous glee in his voice. Sunshine came up alongside 10 cents.
"Hey, you alright, 10 cents?"
Sunshine asked.
"Nah, a few dents and scratches,"
10 cents replied.
No, you know, Sunshine, I've never seen a Z-Sack act like that before. Hey,
agreed Sunshine.
I met him a minute ago. He's certainly worse than the others, and this is the Zero Fleet we're talking about. Yeah, well, he'll get what's coming to him,
said 10 Cents.
I don't know how, but I got a feeling he won't last long round here.
They heard a whistle coming from behind him and saw Hercules. Good morning, my dears, he said. Why the long faces? They told him all about Zain and his conduct towards them. Said Hercules thoughtfully. I can't say I like the sounds of this Zain character very much. I've seen him about the port, and I've heard all about him from Zorran and Warrior. He seems like a rogue, and nothing more.
Hey, he's a right bad un, he is,
agreed Sunshine.
Worse than 10 Z-Stacks put together,
agreed 10 Cents.
At least the others don't go about forcing us away from our toes.
Indeed, said Hercules.
However, I didn't come here to discuss Zane's behaviour, distasteful as it is.
Listen, OJ and I have something to discuss. Meet us at the Star Dock as soon as you've finished work.
Hey, Hercules?
Yeah, sure thing, Hercules. 10 Cents and Sunshine watched as Hercules turned and made his way into port to spread word to the others. Then they sailed towards an oil tanker waiting for a tow into port. After the two switchers had negotiated a price and attached tow lines to the vessel, they took it into port to the oil depot.
Here, Sunshine,
said 10 Cents.
What Hercules said. I reckon it's something serious.
Serious?
What do you mean, Mum?
Asked Sunshine.
Well, you see, I was heading here when I saw him and OJ talking to Zorran about something at Dem Der Rocks. Hey, that does sound strange,
Sunshine remarked.
Zorran actually talking to one of us. Yeah, well, those two are the only ones he'll take seriously out of all of us,
10 Cents added.
But Stars and Zeds being on the same page about something. I reckon whatever it is, must be serious. Hey, well, we'll probably find out more about it tonight,
Sunshine said.
Now come on, let's get this tramper docked and unloaded.
Yeah,
Cure Sunshine,
10 Cents said. That evening, Zorran made his way carefully back to the Zero Dock. He passed the Starfleet on his way. Normally, he would have sneered at them and shouted out an insult. But tonight, he had something more important on his mind. He could see OJ and Hercules telling it to the other Star Tugs. Not one of them liked what they were hearing. He did not like having to tell this to his own fleet either. It brought back... No, he thought. He had to do this. Whether they believed it or not, even his own fleet would never be stupid enough to go against it. Wouldn't they? He pulled into the dock. Captain Zero had already left for home. However, the other Z-Sacks were there, including Zain.
Alright, listen you lot,
Zorran said.
I've just had a word with Hercules and OJ. Talking with the stars now, are we, Zorran?
Zain chuckled.
He's going soft. Must be something catching.
Zack grinned and turned to Zebedee, who shot him a dirty look.
Now shut up, will ya? I ain't going soft,
Zorran retorted.
It's just...
And here he had to take a deep breath before he carried on.
Some of the stuff, they say, isn't so daft as you'd think.
Ha! If Zorran thinks the stars act smart, he really must be going soft in the bridge. Zain sneered. Zip and Zug chuckled at this.
Shut it, you dummies,
Zorran growled. Zip and Zug wisely subsided into silence, while Zain smiled rebelliously at the Z-Stack's leader. Zorran continued.
I don't want to tell you all this,
he said,
but something's come up that you should all know. Trust me, your very stack depends on it. It's about Dem Der Rocks.
We all know what they're like, even in good weather. Well, there's something you don't know. Something happened there a long, long time ago. Once, there was a young lady who lived in the port. Amelia Tuck, her name was. She was the prettiest thing we ever saw along the dockside. Any sailor not taken would try and woo her into a romance, but she never accepted their advances. You see, she was already in love with a sailor, a lieutenant in the Navy called Michael Phillips. They were living in the time of the last war. Everyone was getting married if they could, so Amelia and Michael did so too. But their marriage was short-lived. The lieutenant was called out to fight on board a naval vessel, the USS Icarus. It seemed an enemy ship had been sighted just off the coast of Big City. But the weather was bad that day. It was a full cyclone. No matter how hard the crew tried, the Icarus was no match for the strong winds and rain, and was dashed to pieces on Dem Der Rocks. As this was before we had light ships like Lily put out there, no one discovered the wreck till a week later. No survivors were found. Some of the bodies were recovered, having drowned to death, while others were lost at sea. Among the recovered dead was Lieutenant Phillips. Poor Amelia was so heartbroken at the death of her husband that she shut herself off from the rest of the world for several days. Then, one night, she made her way out to Dem Der Rocks and angrily cursed the whole world for causing the war and the incident which had taken her husband away. She then jumped into the water. Her body was washed up on shore the very next day. Ever since then, a strange image of a woman has been seen on those rocks, announcing the arrival of a cyclone and trying to draw any vessel towards her when it does arrive. Some say she seeks company, others think she wants revenge. The last tug who followed her got caught up in the cyclone and washed up on shore a few meters away from the rocks. Hercules found him the next morning. He was lucky to get out alive from there. I don't know why they didn't take him. All I know is I don't want to go anywhere near them rocks for the next couple of days, and if you blockheads have any sense, you'd do the same. Trust me. She's been seen again. That only means one thing. A cyclone is coming.
A long silence filled the dock. Then there came the sound of chuckling. Everyone looked and saw Zain, wheelhouse shaking as he laughed with his mouth wide open.
A ghost?
He cackled.
A bit of make-believe? You really are a bunch of imbeciles. You all believe this pile of bilge?
It ain't funny, Zain,
warned Zorran.
It's happened before, don't think it won't happen again.
Oh, sure,
giggled Zain.
And the Titanic will rise from the surface, towed by the Flying Dutchman and the Mary Rose, with King Neptune himself at the helm.
Listen,
said Zorran, his patience beginning to break.
I know what I'm talking about. This isn't some fairy story. This, mad as it sounds, is real. And I don't know about you, Zain, but I don't want to see anyone here sent to the breaker's yard because of this. Yeah, well, with a stack like yours,
sneered Zain,
maybe that's where you belong.
That did it. Immediately, Zorran shot forwards towards Zain. Zack and Zebedee realised what was going on and quickly threw lines round their leader.
Let me go. I'll run the scuttlebutt aground.
Zorran raged.
Call it, Zorran,
Zack soothed.
He's not worth it,
agreed Zebedee. Zorran looked at their faces. Normally he would not tolerate this interference in his actions. But this was different. His engine slowed. He backed away.
Pah!
You're pathetic, Zorran. You come in here, telling me a stupid story like that, expecting me to believe it? Well, I've got news for you. I'm going out. I'm going to prove there's no ghost, and then I'm going to tell Captain Zero the whole thing. About how you came in here, telling me some phony tale about ghosts and threatening me with violence. You'll be through here by the time I'm done. You'll be finished, washed up, a has-been with no purpose other than as the butt of jokes for dumb tales only fit for cranes fresh from the building yard. With a final sneer, Zain started his engine and moved away from the dock. The other Zedzaks fell uncertainly asleep, except for Zorran, who stayed awake. He watched as Hercules went past to escort a naval tramper back to its dock. It had been out on an exercise, and none of their tugs could be spared to tow it. Seeing my ocean-going tug seemed to have an effect on Zorran. An image flashed through his mind. A dark, stormy night. A boat heading much too fast towards some rocks. A figure of a woman. A sudden turn caused by waves towards the shoreline. A large tug hauling a much smaller one clear. Zorran tried to remove these from his mind, but they clouded his every thought. The hours passed. A wind began to pick up. Slowly at first, then harder and harder. Soon it was blowing so hard he thought his hat would fall off. Zorran looked at Zain's berth. Zain wasn't a moron. He was worse than that. A disrespectful tugboat who paid no attention to anyone but himself. And yet did he deserve to get himself? Zorran didn't even think about it. Wake up! Wake up, you two! He said to Zack and Zebedee. What is it? Asked Zebedee. Zain's not back yet, Zorran replied. Who cares?
Zack retorted.
It's his own fault for going out in winds like this. We'll find him in the morning.
No, we won't, Zorran commanded. We'll find him now. Get yourself untied and get steam up.
Here, what about those two?
Asked Zebedee, glancing at Zip and Zug. They're too weak for this weather. All they'll do is capsize, Zorran replied. Now come on, that idiot's going to do something stupid. In fact, too stupid even by your standards. We gotta stop him. With that, Zorran towed the other two harbour tugs out into the port. The wind battered them, but they struggled on, a sense of urgency in their propellers. Zack and Zebedee had just got up steam, and all three were making their way towards the harbour mouth when they saw another tugboat seemingly at an odd angle. As they got closer, they found it to be Hercules.
My,
grinned Zack as they passed by.
Seems old Herc's finally got himself stuck.
One of your little games, I assume, eh, Zorran? Hercules asked. Zorran instantly felt nervous. No, Hercules, Well, then, in that case, would you mind telling me what your newest acquisition, Zain, I think he called himself, was doing out here, ramming me onto a sandbank? Zorran gasped.
Zain was here?
He asked.
Which way did he go?
You're not going to like this, replied Hercules, but I saw him make his way towards Dem Der Rocks. He almost made Lily blow her bowl when he found us at Lucky's earlier. The words he used to describe her hardly bear repeating. Then he just carried on towards Dem Der Rocks. Hercules paused when he saw Zorran's horrified face. You did tell him the story about Amelia, didn't you? He asked.
Yeah, I did,
said Zorran,
but the stupid old fool didn't listen to me.
Nor me either, replied Hercules. I tried to stop him from going any further. But this is all I got for my efforts.
Right, that's it,
cried Zorran.
Zack, Zebedee, get a crane and help Hercules back to Lucky's. I'm going after Zain alone. What? Help a star? You serious?
Zain exclaimed.
Shut up,
Zorran replied.
In case you hadn't noticed, we're in the middle of a ruddy cyclone.
No one deserves to be sunk because of bad weather, not even a star tugs. Hear, hear, agreed Zebedee, as they backed away to find a floating crane. Time was running out. Zorran felt his pressure rise drastically. He spun his propeller as fast as he could and sped onwards towards Dem Der Rocks. He hoped desperately that he wasn't too late. The wind began to pick up even harder. Waves crashed against his bow. Eventually, he could see Zain in the distance. The ocean-going tug looked back to him.
Like what you see, washout?
He called. Zorran said nothing. His gaze had turned away from Zain. It came to rest instead upon a young woman standing on the rocks. She had dark hair and a sad look on her face. She seemed to be beckoning them closer towards her. An icy cold feeling ran through Zorran's hull and right into his boiler. Every inch of his body was telling him to turn back while he still could. Zain, however, turned his wheelhouse towards her. He was about to change course when he saw the woman. "Wow," he gasped. She's beautiful." He continued to sail towards her, his pace quickening. Zorran valiantly tried to keep up, but Zain was too fast and the current was too strong.
Zain!
He cried.
Get out of there!
"No!" Zain replied defiantly.
I'm not leaving her. She...
But he never finished his sentence. The woman looked right into his eyes. A strange green glow emanated from them. Her face contorted into an expression of both malicious joy and uncontrollable fury all at the same time. Her body fell away, revealing nothing but a skeleton, seemingly freshly separated from its body. Zain now let out a scream of terror as he realized who this woman was. He turned his head, a begging expression on his face, hoping for some form of assistance from Zorran. But just as he did so, the skeleton reached out her arm. The current eventually overpowered him and forced him right on top of the rock she had been standing on. And before he had time to even register what had just happened, a large wave emerged from behind him and crashed down, taking him with it. Zorran now realized that all hope of rescue was lost and began to turn back to port, but the waves were too great and he found himself being thrown violently onto the shore, landing on his side. Now completely paralyzed with fear, he closed his eyes tight and prayed for morning to come soon. It was a long time before dawn arrived. Hercules, Zack, and Zebedee had already told the authorities, but the weather had been too severe for them to be able to mount an immediate rescue attempt. Grampus went out to inspect the damage and made a solemn report when he returned. Eventually, Big Mac arrived with Little Ditcher alongside Burke and Blair with Mighty Mo and their salvage equipment. Without much trouble, Little Ditcher pulled Zorran back to sea, and Mighty Mo lifted him onto a barge for Big Mac to be taken to Lucky's yard. Both the tugboats and the cranes looked over to the rocks. A single black fedora with white lining could be seen hanging from one of them. The hat of a Z-stack. It was a grim and solemn party that made their way back into port. As soon as Zorran and Big Mac reached Lucky's yard, they found all the remaining Z-stacks waiting for them. Zorran looked sadly but seriously down at them all. They never said a word, but he could tell what was on their stacks. It was her. She did it. At these words, the other Z-stacks all followed Zorran's gaze and watched in horror and mournfulness as Burke and Blair passed by, hauling their barge. Atop it sat the remains of a hull, accompanied by a pile of wood and twisted metal, and sitting on top of it all was the salvaged hat. For a long time, no one said a word. Then Zorran spoke.
Zain never listened to anyone,
He said simply.
nor did that other tug.
He paused, contemplating his next words.
That other tug was me.
Everyone sat in silence, taking in all that had been said and done. Then, without another word, they left for work. Captain Zero was eventually told everything that had happened. Without complaint, he saw to it that Zorran was repaired and back at work, and the salvage company paid him only a small amount for what was left of Zain's parts. They had been too badly damaged to afford a higher price. Normally, Zero would have demanded such an amount, but the severe nature of the incident seemed not to have been lost on him, and he even went so far as to commend Zorran for his actions that night. Following this, it was several days before he returned to his former self. But not even the knowledge that I had paid him for Hercules' salvage seemed to cheer him up this time. The Zedsax found a small inlet just near the harbour mouth. There, they hung Zain's hat where all could see it. No one ever mentioned what had happened that day again. The only time Zain was talked about was when other unruly vessels would arrive into port. They would be taken to the inlet, where they would see the hat and be told his story. Zorran was now back at work, and eventually regained his original persona. He didn't even care that everyone now knew why he had such great respect for Hercules. Needless to say, everyone now knew the importance of listening to others. Zain's hat still stands at the inlet to this very day, as a reminder to everyone that you should always take heed of what others say. For even the wildest of myths and legends can all too easily turn out to be true.